Hello everyone. This is the 23rd part of the story, Abe the Wizard. Chapter 89, Investigation. Abel could also sense that the Knight of Rodney's fighting power had been drained. However, after he heard what the Knight of Rodney had called him, a murderous desire flashed from his eyes. No one could know about Abel's unique combat chi ability. Otherwise, he would become the mutual enemy of all knights. Just think about it, if a knight realized something could not only suck up their combat chi but use it to increase their own strength, of course, they would want that person dead. Abel viciously squeezed with his legs around the neck of the Knight of Rodney. The Knight of Rodney was already defenseless by that point. With that immensely powerful squeeze, all the Knight of Rodney could hear was a loud cracking sound coming from his neck. Soon, his head was hanging motionless on the ground, soft like jelly. I've only killed the Knight of Rodney out of self-defense. All of you in the crowd can testify this. Abel said as he stood up. Since things had already progressed to this point, he no longer wanted to hide his identity. He lightly lifted his face mask, the youthful face of Abel appeared in front of the crowd. From the innocent smile on his face, no one could have guessed this youngster was the killer of an elite knight. Master Abel. It's the Lord of Abel. The guests in the crowd could recognize Abel in one glance, and his fame was too wildly spread in Harvest City. Although it hasn't been long since Abel had become famous, he already became the role model of how each family in Harvest City should educate their child. Outstanding, gifted, hardworking, ambitious, was just some common words people would often describe Abel as a person. The crowd also knew that they had no choice but to expose their identity as well. Since he had killed an elite knight, attending a black market auction was pale in comparison. As the crowd revealed themselves one by one, most of them were businessmen, with only a few of them being nobles. The person who led Abel into this auction was a young noble. At the time, Kree's auction stall had already sent out all their guards and attendants to clean up the mess in the hall. The people in the crowd were being treated accordingly to their status. Abel was sitting on a chair, drinking a dense, aromatic coffee while chatting to that young noble. The Honorable Lord of Abel, I am Polly, Tsuechi. It's my pleasure to meet you, said that young noble as he bowed to Abel. Hello, are you from the Tsuechi family? Abel had heard of the Tsuechi family. Although they did not have an estate, they were a famous noble family specialized in trades. I am the wildest son of the Tsuechi family. I am so glad you heard of us. It is my honor. Polly seemed to be very well-mannered. He gave another bow after he finished his sentence. Abel slightly bowed back, as long as you've been to Harvest City, who would not know about the Tsuechi family? It's a pity that this glory of my family will soon get dimmer because of me, said Polly with a bitter smile. Abel knew that Polly's father, the current inheritance of the Tsuechi family, was a lord. According to the law of the Duchy of Carmel, in order to inherit all the possession of a family, one must become a knight. Therefore, Polly had to become an official knight before his father passes away. Polly looked at Abel with admiration. He said with his eyes fixed on Abel, I will one day to be like you, becoming a noble with an estate. Seeing someone a lot older than him looking it down with admiration, Abel couldn't help but let out a smile. He then said, hope your dreams come true. Harry Castle will be glad to welcome you for a visit. Polly was very excited by Abel's invitation. The social circle of these noble with estates were very hard to join. Forming a strong relationship with Abel would definitely make it a lot easier, and undoubtedly bring along a lot of benefits in the future. Abel didn't often socialize much with people. Since Polly seemed like a nice person, he decided to give Polly an invite. Although he did not set a time for an invitation, it sent a signal to every noble nearby that Harry Castle had accepted Polly as a friend. Abel then turned his head towards that young female elf who stood still at the exact same spot. Abel stood up and approached her. He asked with a non-threatening voice, where are you from? Is there anything I can do to help you? The young female elf turned her big sparkly eyes towards Abel. She doesn't seem to understand what he was saying. The honorable lord of Abel, this elf could not understand human language, said an old man with a silky suit, as he approached and bowed to Abel. Abel gazed at the young female elf with a hint of pity, being thrown into a completely unfamiliar environment, and not knowing a single word of its language was like adding salt on top of a wound. Abel then turned towards the old man and asked, "Who are you?" "The honorable lord of Abel, I am Cree," said the old man in a silky suit, as he bowed to Abel again. "Are you the owner of this auction stand?" asked Abel as he lightly tilted his head towards Cree. "Yes, it is a property of your humble servant," Cree replied. "I'll buy this elf, when things had settled I will take her away," said Abel in a stale tone. The outcome had already been confirmed by these words of Abel. He would not need to take Cree's opinion into consideration. "The honorable lord of Abel, consider this elf as a gift from Cree's auction stand," said Cree, his voice came across as well-intentioned. "Do I look like I don't have enough money to pay for it myself?" Abel didn't care about money. He just didn't want to have any affiliation with these black market auction stands. Since Abel still hadn't fully calmed down from the fight he just had, he raised his voice as he said this, sending a light wave of impose into the atmosphere of the hall. Dong! Dong, the sound of glasses falling on the floor. Abel's wave of impose had knocked a few glasses of coffee off the hands of some nobles. It had caught them off guard, and the rest of the crowd had suddenly become quiet. Luckily, Abel was still an intermediate knight. His impose didn't hold any damaging power. However, due to the interference of his pale gold combat chi, the area his impose was able to cover was even bigger than those of an elite knight. Cree was directly facing Abel. He realized had deeply angered Abel, so he immediately fell to the floor. The surrounding crowd also looked at him with despise. Who did Cree thinks he was? A mere elf could settle the anger of the Lord of Abel. Not only that, but he still wanted to become a friend of Abel. No one with a mind would dare to do a stupid thing like this. Abel took out 150 gold coins of 100 value from his pocket and threw it in front of Cree. "The deal is complete." Suddenly, a noise came from outside the stand. It was a Harvest City public security guard. These public security guards are the law enforcement of Harvest City. However, they do not have any control over the nobles. If a noble broke a law, they could only be reported to the noble arbitral tribunal. When the public security guard saw the Lord of Abel, they gave out an amiable expression. They stepped up and asked Abel, "The honorable Lord of Abel, did you get hurt?" Abel replied, "Hello public security guard. I've attended a little event within Cree's auction stand and got attacked by an elite knight. I even exposed my identity to him, but he still attacked me with his combat chi. My goodness. An elite knight has the guts to attack the Lord of Abel in Harvest City?" The face of the public security guard immediately changed. Attacking a noble with an estate was a very serious matter, let alone the person committing the crime was an elite knight. This situation at hand must be very troublesome. Of course, everyone here can testify it. I swear to the spirit that everything I said was true," said Abel, pointing at the crowd in the hall. I swear to the spirit that everything the Lord of Abel had said was true. No one in the crowd had the guts to offend the Lord of Abel for a dead elite knight, especially when Abel really was telling the truth. "The honorable Lord of Abel, where is the guy who had attacked you?" asked a public security guard. "The guy is there," Abel replied, pointing at a dead body on the ground. The public security guard stepped up and flipped the dead body around. When he saw the face of the dead body, he can't help but call out in fear. It was the elite knight of Rodney. Of course, the public security guard knew about the Knight of Rodney. In fact, he was very familiar with him. Ever since the Knight of Rodney had become a knight of the city palace, he was responsible for arresting and killing countless intermediate and elite occupation holders. He was definitely one of the most powerful knights in the city. However, the public security guard knew fully well that, since the Knight of Rodney was the one who attacked the Lord of Abel first, getting killed was inevitable. No matter what had happened, no one could ever insult the dignity of a noble. "Which superior killed the Knight of Rodney?" said the public security guard with a bow. "I killed him myself," said Abel with a monotone voice. Chapter 90, Abel was innocent. How is that possible? In a slip of the tongue, these words leaked out of the mouth of the public security guard. He then immediately followed up and said, "I am so sorry, the Honorable Lord of Abel. I was only stunned by your power." Abel replied, "No worries. It's not that I am powerful. It's just that," suddenly, he paused his sentence. He then proceeded to say, "How can someone without a weapon be a knight?" At that moment, Steward Robin, the steward of the Harry family temporary courtyard in Harvest City, had arrived. He was called here by the auction stand in regard to the attack of the Lord of Abel in Cree's auction stand. Normally, when a situation like this had happened, the first people to contact were the public security guards and the family of Abel. "Young Master Abel, Steward Robin is here at your service," said Steward Robin as he bowed to Abel. Only servants from Harry Castle would call Abel a young master. "Robin, what are you doing here?" "Never mind, you can help me bring this elf back," said Abel pointing at that young female elf. "Yes, young Master Abel." After Steward Robin saw that Abel was not injured, a heavy boulder had lifted off his heart full of worry. Then, he took away the elf as Abel had ordered. The reason why Abel had ordered the steward to take away the young female elf was that he didn't want many people to know that an elf was involved in this situation. Buying or selling an elf was not a dignified thing to do. Everyone in the crowd, no matter businessmen or nobles, were sophisticated enough to know fully well that Abel wanted to keep this a secret. Of course, the public security guard would not interfere with things such as a noble buying an elf. If he had reported it to the noble arbitral tribunal, the most they would do was to give Abel a warning. The public security guard would not take this risk to offend the Lord of Abel. The public security guard began to collect the evidence, but that was none of Abel's business. Soon, Abel was out of Cree's auction stand. In turn, he entered the alley of the auction stand. By that point, the alley was already pitch black. There was no one around. Suddenly, Abel jumped up. He grabbed onto the 3 meters high wall, and with an effortless flip, Abel had entered the Calgary Potion store beside Cree's auction stand. Abel had actually entered the backyard of the Calgary Potion store. He stopped his footsteps and listened carefully. There was only the sound of insects calling, not a single sound of humans. The backyard was empty. There was no one stopping Abel. Soon, he had entered the master's bedroom. The first thing he noticed was the bed that Darren had described. It was huge, almost taking up half the bedroom. Abel searched the surrounding for the mechanism. Due to Abel's lack of knowledge when it came to this, he walked around for a circle and still had no result. So came to a halt and stopped searching. Abel walked to the side of the bed and reached his hand to grab the bedside. He slowly applied force, and pale gold combat chi began to unleash. 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds. As he continued to apply force, the bed began to make a cracking noise. When Abel's force reached 4,500 pounds, the bed had been completely flipped over. Underneath exposed a pitch-black tunnel and a bunch of damaged mechanisms surrounding it. Abel took out that night pearl from his pocket and threw it into the tunnel. The tunnel was not too deep, only around 5 meters. He then immediately jumped down. Abel arrived at a secret chamber. It was around 20 square meters. There were only around 10 large boxes scattered on the ground and a table in the center with some small boxes on the top. Abel opened the small boxes on the table. Under the illumination of the night pearl, a large patch of 100-unit gold coins flashed in front of Abel's eye. However, over the years, he had become numb to money. He threw the small boxes into the portal bag and turned his gaze towards the large boxes on the floor. He opened the big boxes as well. Inside was filled with all kinds of potions, from the ones for novice knights to the one for official knights. Of course, anyone who practiced combat chi could use these potions, but due to tight regulations, some occupations could only buy some of these potions in the black market. Abel shoved everything into his portal bag and left the tunnel. He looked at the bed he had destroyed with a headache. At first, he wanted to just take things and leave without a trace. But now, anyone with an eye would notice what had happened. Since things had already progressed to this point, Abel had no choice. He opened up the oil lamp next to the bed and poured the oil all over the bed. He then used flint and lit the bed on fire. After Abel had stepped out of the room, he watched the Calgary potion light up in flame a few hundred meters behind him. Since the courtyard was made out of wood, the entire thing was engulfed in a sea of fire. Abel continued to stare with a pair of cold, emotionless eyes. The sound of firemen came from a distance, but the time was late. In a thundering sound, Calgary Potion Shop had collapsed onto the ground. The evidence of Abel's good deed had completely vanished into the fire. 5 days had passed. The elite wolf rider of Florling had gone through the sewerage to connect with Prince Middleton George, the 7th Prince of the Royal. The elite wolf rider of Florling had been driven mad by his failure. In the letter he delivered to the 7th Prince, he threatened that if the prince didn't find out who was the thief that stole his treasure, he would inform the public about the deal he had made with the prince. Ping! A luxurious cup had fallen to the oakwood floor. The reporter stood in front of Prince Middleton was holding a large stack of information, drenched in sweat. What took you so long? We had spent a lot of money on our networks, how come we still can't find anything about who had stolen the Wolf Rider's treasure? Prince Middleton roared. Your Majesty, according to what the elite Wolf Rider of Florling, it was a wargen who stole the treasure. It's very hard for us to find the trace of a wargen, and it should be the responsibility of the elite Wolf Rider of Florling. That wargen might have already returned to the Orc Empire. The reporter said with his head pointing down. Yet, the words were spoken very clearly, no wonder why he could attain an important role such as a reporter. You have a point. How about the incident with the Calgary Potion Store? Asked Prince Middleton in a low voice. The biggest suspects are the other princes, only someone with a strong information network could find out that Calgary Potion was your possession. Said the reporter in a certain tone. How about the hairy castle that the elite Wolf Rider of Florling had mentioned, could they be involved as well? Although the elite Wolf Rider of Florling did not say much about Hairy Castle, Prince Middleton could tell that he was a bit scared of them. Since the elite Wolf Rider of Florling wasn't willing to attack the Hairy Castle near Harvest City personally, it suggested that the fighting power of Hairy Castle was equal, if not better than an elite Wolf Rider. According to the report, there were quite a few elite and intermediate Wolf Rider who had attacked Hairy Castle, but all of them had failed miserably. Since Hairy Castle has not submitted any outstanding military service ever since, it seemed like Hairy Castle is holding a lot of hidden power. The reporter analyzed. The reason why Hairy Castle did not submit an outstanding military service was that they didn't want anyone to know that even their normal knight servants were equipped with magic weapons. The day when the Wolf Garden was attacked, and the day where Calgary Potion Store had the incident, he had just bought an elf from an auction stand. During the process, he had a fight with an elite knight and ended up killing the elite knight, said the reporter. Prince Middleton then asked with curiosity, was that Lord of Abel really that powerful? How much power is he hiding? There were no official knights in the scene, but according to the testimony of an intermediate warrior, Abel was incredibly gifted in physical battle. The reporter proceeded to say with an odd expression, at that time, the elite knight was not equipped with any weapon, and Abel locked him on the floor and directly choked him to death. The elite Wolf Rider of Florling's suspicions of Abel's involvement in the attack of the Wolf Garden might be true after all. If Abel actually possessed this ability, he could also very well be able to open the secret chamber in Calgary Potion Store, then burn the store down, said Prince Middleton. He began to suspect Abel. Our investigators asked a lot of people. It did not take long until Abel had arrived back at Harry Castle after he left the auction stand. It was definitely not enough time for him to open up all the mechanisms within our secret chamber. Moreover, it would not be possible for a single person to take away all put possessions. The elite wolf rider of Florling did not tell Prince Middleton that the treasure he had lost was the orc spirit portal bag. He only told him it was a treasure. Report to the elite wolf rider of Florling everything we had discussed. Tell him he can go search the war gen himself, and there was not enough time for Abel to attack the wolf garden. No one knew that Abel had White Cloud as his mode of transport. Hundreds of miles could be completed in a blink of an eye. Little did Abel know, everything he had done had already been proven innocent by Prince Middleton, who he had never met before. If Abel knew about this, he would definitely celebrate with a large bottle of wine. Chapter 91, Studying. The morning sun cast upon the side castle of Harry Castle. Early in the morning, Abel had already finished his basic night training and ate his breakfast. He lazily sat next to the tree in front of the front gate with a bottle of fruit juice in his hand. Meanwhile, Little Mount Wolf Black Wind was laying on his leg. Little Mount Wolf Black Wind's relationship with Abel had grown closer and closer. As long as Abel was in the castle, Black Wind could lean against him, run around in a circle, and wiggling its tail to beg for Abel to pat it. If Black Wind had not grown so fast, it would look just like a big dog. However, it was now a lot bigger than a big dog. In front of Abel stood the second inhabitants of the side castle of Harry Castle, a young female elf. After multiple hand signal exchanges, Abel had confirmed her name. However, the name was way too long. It sounded like the ultimate tongue twister. Abel decided to call her only by the first two syllables, Lorraine. Abel not only did not make Lorraine his female servant, but he also treated as a guest to the castle. He gave her one of the guest rooms in the side castle of Harry Castle and appointed a female servant to help take care of her. Moreover, Abel did not force Lorraine to learn the human language. Instead, he was happy to learn the elf language from Lorraine. It was Lorraine herself who suggested to Abel that she wants to learn human language. Such a studious elf. Fruit juice, said Abel as he picked up another bottle of fruit juice and gave it to Lorraine. Lorraine's eyes were like sparkling gems. Her pupil was like a jet black, yet translucent ceramic. She no longer had that frightened look in her gaze. Instead, she was thankful for Abel. She was very satisfied with her current lifestyle, and she softly repeated after Abel, fruit juice. Afterward, a string of mysterious yet majestic sound came out of the mouth of Lauren. Then, Abel tried to repeat after her. Both Abel and Lorraine were very smart people. They could learn and remember the words they had said to each other in one take. Next time when they had encountered these words again, they could use it. Abel had set fixed time every day for language learning, which was from after he had completed his night's training, to lunchtime. Abel had also designed a detailed learning plan, influenced by how he had learned English, first learning individual words, then grammar. Abel took out a piece of sheepskin cardboard with the drawing of everyday objects, plants, and animals. Of course, every single drawing was extremely small, but they were very detailed. Abel had hired the best painter in Harvest City to draw this educational tool according to his will. Abel pointed at a certain object on the board, and the individual word learning lesson with Lorraine had begun. Other than then naughty Black Wind, no one in the castle had disturbed them. Although learning a new language was a bit dry and dull, Abel was very pleased to have a beautiful elf lady to learn with him. Until now, Abel never really had any friends with similar age. Since he had adopted the body of a 13-year-old boy after he came to this world, Abel's mindset had also gotten younger. He always wanted some friends that were of similar age with him, and with the presence of Lorraine, this gap within Abel's heart had been fulfilled. These past few days, the Lord of Marshall noticed that Abel seemed to be deep in thoughts. Every time he had the chance during lunchtime, he would mutter to Abel, "Abel, you really had grown up." Abel couldn't care less about the Lord of Marshall trying to mind his business. Both Abel and Lorraine were still very young, especially since an elf's childhood years often last for a very long time. Abel always just treated Lorraine as a younger sister. Once he had the chance, he would let Lorraine back home. Abel fully understood what it feels like to live without a family and the pain of missing them. Abel had already decided to help Lorraine the moment he saw her gaze in the auction stand. During lunchtime, Abel brought Lorraine along to have lunch with the Lord of Marshall. With an extra elf sitting behind the table, the atmosphere felt more like a family than if Abel was to have lunch with only the Lord of Marshall. Abel liked this atmosphere quite a lot. Even the Lord of Marshall's appetite had gotten better. Lorraine did not eat anything other than a few pieces of fruit and a cup of fruit juice for lunch. She did not show any interest in the meat and the wine. Abel began to worry about her nutrition, so he placed a large chunk of meat onto her plate and softly said, "Lorraine, eat some more meat." Lorraine was stunned by the piece of lean meat, and she did not know what to do with it. It was almost as big as her plate. Lorraine put down her cutlery and opened her mouth. She wanted to say something, but since she had only started to learn the human language not long ago, she couldn't find the correct words to express her feelings. "Abel, don't throw random food at her." "Elves don't eat meat," said the Lord of Marshall. He found it very amusing to watch Abel interacting with Lorraine. "How can you grow if you don't eat meat?" Abel muttered as he retrieved the meat from Lorraine and placed it onto his own plate. Then, he took out a new plate and put it in front of Lorraine. Lorraine had learned very quickly. "How's it going learning the elf language, Abel?" said the Lord of Marshall. He took a sip of the wine and stared at Abel. "It's going well. A few words are hard to pronounce, but once I grasp the formula, it should be easy," Abel replied. "It's easy." That's the most arrogant thing I had ever heard. The scholar of Harvest City might cough blood if they heard these words from you. The elf language was the most difficult language in the Holy Continent, said the Lord of Marshall as he pointed at Abel and laughed. "That's because they don't have a good teacher," said Abel. Although Lorraine couldn't understand Abel, she sensed that Abel was complimenting her, so her smile began to grow even wider. The lunch had ended in this heartwarming atmosphere. As the three was getting ready to leave, suddenly Steward Lindsay had approached them in a slightly rushed manner. "Master, young master, Ms. Lorraine, Viscount Dickens is here for a visit and," Steward Lindsay paused for a bit and proceeded to say, "the two other people that arrived with him seem to have equal, if not higher status than him." The Lord of Marshall and Abel exchanged gaze. It was an odd timing for Viscount Dickens to visit Harry Castle. A few weeks ago, Harry Castle was attacked by the Wurgens of the Wolf family, but Viscount Dickens didn't even send anyone here to help, so why did he suddenly decide to come for a visit? But no matter what, Viscount Dickens had personally came here for a visit. Both the Lord of Marshall and Abel had to go outside and welcome him. Abel then turned to Lorraine and said a few simple yet elegant words from the elf language. "You, yourself, rest." Although Abel could not form a complete sentence with the elf language, smart Lorraine could understand what Abel had meant with these three words. She then replied with human language to Abel, "Okay," and then she walked off towards the direction of her room. "Welcome, the Honorable Viscount Dickens. I am very sorry for the wait." When the Lord of Marshall had arrived at the living room in the castle, Viscount Dickens and the other two guests had already sat down and began to chat with a cup of coffee in their hands. Abel followed closely behind the Lord of Marshall. He bowed towards the three guests and asked them how they were doing. The Lord of Marshall, "Master Abel, I hope I didn't disturb you," said Viscount Dickens as he stood up and bowed back. He then introduced the two guests beside him to the Lord of Marshall and Abel. "These two men are Head Commander Lowell and Head Commander Hopkin." Suddenly Abel's gaze tensed. These two men were head commanders. In order to know how significant this was, one had to understand that in a big city such as Harvest City, Viscount Dickens was the only head commander in charge. All of a sudden, there were 3 head commanders appearing in Harry Castle. This information had deeply shocked both the Lord of Marshall and Abel. The Honorable Head Commander Lowell, the Honorable Head Commander Hopkins, welcome to Harry Castle. The Lord of Marshall replied immediately and quickly, followed by a bow. No need to be so polite. I am not Viscount Dickens. I am not used to it, said Head Commander Lowell straightforwardly. What brought you 3 honorable superiors to Harry Castle? The Lord of Marshall said carefully. Hopkins and I want Dickens to bring us here to pay a visit to Master Abel. Also, we heard that your castle had driven off a bunch of wolf riders, so we just want to come here to take a look. These words by Head Commander Lowell showed his respect for Abel as a blacksmith master. At that point, the Lord of Marshall felt a big rock had lifted off his chest. These 2 head commander did not come here with bad intent. I also could not believe it. How could Harry Castle withstand so many elite wolf riders, said Head Commander of Hopkins. His voice was a bit raspy when he was speaking. It sent a sturdy and serious tone. This marks the end of part 23 of the story, Abe the Wizard. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.